What's going on, everyone? AP over here at Run Pure Sports, bringing to you the Lineup Builder Show with our partners over at Sabersim. I got Jordan in here like we do each and every week. Jordan, how's it going, my man? How are you doing this week?
I'm good. It's a fun time of the year. We've got NBA playoffs getting into gear now here. Play-ins this week, baseball ramping up, golf season getting hot. It's a fun time to be playing DFS and talking some sports here on a Thursday morning. It is for me. I don't know. I'm sure there's some folks already into their afternoon here, but yeah, I'm excited to get into it. Excited to be back here for another week.
Yeah, I am too. We're gonna do a couple things, and before we get into that, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe. Helps us out a lot. Allows us to keep this free for each and all of you. What we're gonna do two things. We're gonna briefly touch on NBA. I think it's we've spent a lot of times this season going through NBA and how to use Sabersim, the optimizer, and going through the sims, explaining everything, strategy. We've done it all, but I think things change a little bit when it comes to playoff NBA. And I think one thing we do pretty well over here at Run Pure Sports is adjusting. And we saw that with our guy Mangone yesterday. He shipped like 11K. Shout out to Mangone. Absolute fire content. His build was awesome. So shout out to him. But so you got the Friday slate up. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So, I mean, they're initial sims, right? But we do have them up. They're going to change. Shay's jumping out to me already. It probably a little under projected there, but does have something that we can work with here and talk a little bit about here. We got a lot of playoff games here starting this weekend too. So wanted to do a little bit of NBA to make sure everybody's ready for the weekend.
So one thing is you see when the playoffs come around, it's such a unique transition because we go through this period where you have tanking teams, you have teams that are locked in and have nothing to play for, but they're trying to get their reps. You have other teams that are just like maybe more so the tanking teams playing around with rotations. OKC was an easy example that we can go to, like late season, mid-season and late season. They would like pull starters at halftime and start someone else randomly. I mean, they were one of the more frustrating teams to target. But now what we see in the playoffs is condensed rotations. So let's bring up the Miami Heat and Bulls. We can start on the Heat side. Actually, let's start on the Bulls side just because that's a little bit more fresh, in our minds. So the thing about the Bulls is they got the big three. And I mean, you can laugh at that, the big three. I don't know if they're a big three, but that's kind of what they are, their identity, which is Vucevic, DeRozan, and Zach LaVine. We should expect heavy minutes from these guys. LaVine, 40 last time. Vucevic, 39. DeRozan, 30. And then what you see is you have their backcourt, which defensively they have been a little bit better with Pat Bev, Caruso, and then Kobe White's been one of the guys that has filled a nice role. But again, Kobe White's going to be one of those guys where I would under project him. Like what is the current projection? So 19.26. I mean, at 4,800, maybe it's fine. Like what I'm getting at, Jordan, is you often see these, what I call them bad values or trappy type value plays. Their projection alone, kind of based off of what we saw during the regular season, will put them into more builds than what I think we actually want. Now, Alex Caruso is kind of a more interesting guy because he can do so much. They need him in there defensively. You're going to see more minutes from him. We saw 31. But again, I would say for me, the guys I have a hard time trusting for the Bulls, just for the Bulls example, is going to be the Kobe White, the Alex Caruso. And I'm going to be, if anything, more cautious with their projection, meaning wherever the industry averages, I might bump it down a few ticks, and I might put an emphasis on the guys or bump up the guys that I feel more confident in, which is the Zach LaVine, DeRozan, and even Vucevic. Even though Vucevic has not been as aggressive with his shot, it's been more LaVine and then DeRozan and then Vucevic. We know from a minute standpoint that those guys are going to get nice run. Let's go over to the Miami Heat side and let me pull up. The Heat, I think, is an interesting one. I mean, they look deflated. They're at home against the Hawks. They win that game. They move on. They get the 7th place, and now they're battling for the 8th place spot. And the one thing I don't get about Miami, and why, even going back to when we did a podcast with Spread and Tyler and the guys on the bet side, I had the Heat way, way down. I just was not high on them because I don't really understand what they're trying to do. This kind of small ball lineup is just not working for them. I mean, they're trying to play guys like Max Struss, Caleb Martin, out there with Gabe Vincent and, Tyler Hero. And you're talking about your only big, you're only like, he's trying to be like a stretch 4, stretch 5, like even 3, like is Bam Adebayo. Outside of that, you have a really small team, and you lack kind of the physicality that is needed in the playoffs. This rotation is one that I think could be frustrating, but there are a few telling things. One, Kyle Lowry, we got to like, I haven't even looked at what his price is. 5'6", he's a lock. He's an absolute lock in my opinion. 33 minutes last game. The usage was awesome. We knew it would be 33 points. It's kind of that Kyle Lowry that was missing at the latter half of the season. I think a lot of that had to do with injury management. I was surprised by, Jimmy Butler wasn't as aggressive as I thought he would. But again, Jimmy Butler is going to be a guy that's going to play 38, 40 minutes. Bam Adebayo is going to play heavy, heavy minutes. The guys I don't trust and the guys that I would bump way down. So Gabe Vincent, 17-3, again, 4-9. I mean, I don't know if he would hit a ton of builds there, but he's going to be a guy that I bumped down. Max Struss, a guy that I bumped down. Caleb Martin played 29 minutes. I don't trust him though. We're gonna get to some pieces that we trust, but like what I'm getting at is by building it out this way and seeing what these final builds look like can be kind of telling to what roster can, like what a safe, maybe like cash base, or single entry type roster construction, would look like. And I want to emphasize those guys. Tyler Hero is another one that I worry about because he's so shot dependent. He took 23 shots though, which is absolutely incredible. So like we don't want to be too low on his projection, but this matchup. So the one thing and the other reason why I'd be a little worried about him is just the Bulls have been pretty decent with Caruso, Pat Bev against opposing backcourts. It really does seem like a Bam Adebayo or Jimmy Butler type of game. And then Kyle Lowry in there too, just because he can distribute, he can make shots, and the minutes are going to be there. And then Kevin Love, it looks like he was like completely out of the rotation. I don't think they trust him. And so he played 3 minutes last game. And this is something where it's just like, especially with Spoelstra, if he doesn't trust someone, or like if the matchup doesn't fit, we have to kind of speculate what that's going to be. And Kevin Love playing 3 minutes against the Hawks. I mean, I don't think this match, like I don't see a reason why they would play him here against the Bulls either. So like he's someone that I would probably like cross off or significantly bump down. So if we go to OKC, now this is fresh in our heads, coming off a nice win yesterday. The one thing about OKC is, and if you got on this early and pounded this, I think like Mangone did, but we finally saw a very tight rotation. Jalen with an L, Williams, played 40 minutes. Shea, SGA, 41 minutes. Josh Giddey, 42 minutes. Lou Dort, 36 minutes. So like all of these like random, the Aaron Wiggins, the Isaiah Joe, Lindy Waters, I'm Xing those guys out. And I'm just relying on kind of, again, and this is where value becomes thin. But if you can find that one value piece to make these guys work, or just find a build where you're leaning on these heavy minutes, you're going to have an overall nice lineup. I think the last one, let's see, the Timberwolves. So Rudy Gobert, he's still out, right? What a crazy series.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, so Naz Reid also out. Is Gobert out for the – did they send him home for the – I can't remember, but it looks like –
I don't know if I've heard – I don't know if I've heard for Friday's game yet. But, I mean, we have him as out right now. So not showing up in the projections there. But I don't know if we've got news on that yet.
But they, again, tight rotations against the Lakers. They look good. Like I actually I fell asleep before this game was over. I hate to admit that. I was just exhausted. But the game went to overtime. I think they were up by like 12 when I fell asleep. But what we saw in that fourth quarter is a beast of a Lakers team. When I went and rewatched it, we saw them hold the Wolves to 12 points. So you saw that this is where experience of the Lakers and just the defensive nature of that team really came to play. But again, we saw tight rotations, 41 minutes from Towns. The guy that I thought was most interesting was Kyle Slow-Mo Anderson. And I thought it was really interesting what DraftKings did with his price last game. I thought he was overpriced, but he got all the minutes in the world. Obviously, the 45 minutes includes overtime, but still, you're looking at 40 minutes there. Mike Conley, again, I didn't trust him, but now I have to because the minutes are there. That's their guy, and you're going to see a tight rotation. So what I'm getting at is I want to be more like I think the edge in playoff NBA DFS is to get very aggressive on over projecting the guys that we just know their minutes are going to be there. We know the rotation is going to be solid for them. And then I like running like a cash build once we made these adjustments. And I like looking at, let's just say like the top 50 builds. And then I make note of what I like, what I don't, what values are now popping after these adjustments. And that gives me a nice baseline because in the playoffs, I like to run 1 to 3 lineups. That's been my strategy. But so much of it is built around using Sabersim to come up with and dial in what exposures that I want. Like, what's your take? What's your thoughts on all of that, Jordan?
Yeah, I like it. I think it's one of the bigger edges in playoff basketball. The thing that's tough for any model, right, is especially in elimination games or, even throughout the course of a series as we actually get into the playoffs here and the coaches are making defensive adjustments or matchup adjustments. Sometimes these rotational changes, you're going to have a 1-game sample size or just kind of a hunch to be working from. So Sabersim we are going to be making some of these adjustments on our end and picking up on some of this. But if you are studying the rotations, watching the games and just think that somebody looks a little under projected. I had the minutes column pulled up there next to the projection. That's actually, once this build finishes, I'll bounce back and show that here. But that's actually the way I like to set up my Sabersim for the playoffs is to just see the projections side by side with the minutes. And you can kind of quickly calculate like points per minute roughly in your head. And if you're looking at DeMar DeRozan projected for 34 minutes and he's got a 36-point projection, if he's playing 41, I mean, he should be projected, 42, 43 points. Very easy to just do that quickly. Take some minutes away from some of the bottom of the rotation guys. You'll see Sabersim right now is projecting like 10-man rotations here for these teams. 10 guys aren't going to see the court in these games for these basically elimination games here in the play-ins. I think it's probably going to be a little bit more like 8. So very easy to take some of those minutes from some of the guys at the bottom and spread it around. I love the idea as well, just about being sharp with the way that you are finding some of these value plays, right? Because the pricing is still going to be inefficient on some of these guys. But if we know Jalen Williams is in the rotation, he's getting, even 34 minutes at 4-4. I mean, he's a lock, right? And he's probably the best play on the slate. And I think even other people just using average projections that are, based on the course of the season are going to miss that. And they're going to be tying up salary and tying up roster spots with some of these other guys that we've identified here that just aren't very good plays. So I think this is one of the bigger edges here in NBA DFS, this early playoffs here where you've got a lot of people coming in from the regular season that are just going to stick to their same process and not really change anything and miss out on some of this.
Yeah, very, very good points. And you see it right there. Like, look at that second build. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, again, one of those fringe plays that really scare me.
Yep.
If he gets you a 9, your lineup is really gonna struggle unless every other one of these fringe values falls in that same category. Like if you go up to that top build, the one that like, do I love Pat Bev? No. Do I love the minutes he's likely to get, especially in a matchup against, the Miami Heat? Yeah, because what did we just say? We said Miami likes to play small. They like to Max Truss. They like Caleb Martin. They like these guys. They're like 4 wings and they're like a point guard, 3 wings, and Bam Adebayo is kind of what they're trying to do. And it's just, in my opinion, it's not not going to work, and we're already seeing that. So like I think Chicago goes in. I think they beat Miami, and Miami losing 2 home games back to back. I don't think many people have that on their bingo cards, but that's what I see happening just with how this Bulls team played. They look motivated. And then you could almost make the same case like the Thunder. We know this team is when they play their starting 5 heavy minutes, they've been really good with Shea, with Giddey, with Lou Dort as a defender, Jalen Williams. These guys are awesome. So I love the fact that we got Jalen with a Y in there. But again, what I say he played. He played what, like 30 minutes or something? I mean, he's underpriced. That's like let me pull it up real quick.
Yeah, I think you said like 38 minutes or something like that. I mean, at 4-4,
32 minutes for Jalen with
okay.
a Y or Jalen with an L, 40 minutes. So, and then the tough part is they have the same name, spelled differently, but they also have like the same hairstyle, and they're both tall and like long, athletic. They're hard to tell out there. But 4-4, that's a value play that I'm going to absolutely love. So this top build right there. The slate's tomorrow. We're going to relook at it or whatever. I'm not saying I'm playing this, but this is the type of build that I would really like because the value piece is there. We know there's some minute upside. We know there's some production attached to these people. Whereas the second build there with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, for example, and it even could be like a Max Struss or a Caleb Martin, those just worry me a little bit more. Now in tournaments, larger field tournaments, like the $20, $100K to first that they've been running, I think some of those plays are fine. It really comes down to what are you playing. And in the playoffs, my edge is the single entry, exactly what Mangone shipped yesterday, the $200 single entry, the $100 single entry, like those type of contests where if you focus on these guys that are going to get the minutes, the production's likely, we have a good idea of what the rotations are going to look like. Those are the type of builds that I like to focus on.
Yeah, and I think, at this point in the year, the way that you do get a little bit different to take down one of those big GPPs is looking at those rotations, making some of the adjustments to the player projections, and then getting to those guys that the field is just going to have slightly under projected at the top end. Right. Like I think, there's going to be game scripts where Nickeil Alexander-Walker is the guy you need. Right. I just think I'm totally on the same page with you where I think that's going to be thin. And I think just going there just because, or even some of these other guys down here, right. Going to, you look at Caleb Martin and you think, 2.4% or projected owned. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's the play you need. And yes, you're certainly going to be a little bit different, at least with what the ownership on Thursday morning here says. But I think, we're looking at some of these guys here now that are some of the top plays on the slate at pretty low ownership here. Like Kyle Lowry's a good one that jumps out, right? Under projected probably on the minutes, under projected on the projections. If that's true around the industry and you're getting him at 11%, that's probably enough leverage here to make a lineup work here, playing a lot of other guys that you want. It's still a 2-game slate. You can't have a completely low-owned lineup. So I think that the big way you get different really is looking at those rotations and sometimes even being a little ahead of it. Like I'm a big kind of trust the Sims guy. AP, that talking long enough here with me on this show. I will really, the NBA playoffs is a time where I'm going to put my hand in the dirt and sometimes just make a call that the rotation is going to change going into the start of a new series and you've got 2 different teams playing each other, or maybe after a bad game 1, right? A favorite gets upset in game 1 at home. What are they going to do in game 2 to adjust and trying to be ahead of that by a game? Because you sometimes don't even have the 1-game sample to work from for some of this stuff when you're talking about coaching adjustments in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely agree with you there. And actually, I was just quickly re-looking. The only team that really didn't run a tight rotation that might be frustrating to keep an eye on is the Hawks. Outside of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, we saw a 9-man rotation there too. And so that's going to be a team where you see Quinn Snyder make probably more adjustments too. And obviously, it's his first go-around in the playoffs with this team. So anyways, let's I think we've hit it pretty good for NBA. All of our NBA content will be back tomorrow. We got the heat maps going. That's Glock and myself. We'll have shows around it, and we'll do this basically all through the playoffs. So it's a ton of fun. And we'll have the heat maps up for 2-game slates all the way down to when we just have showdown slates going. So that's what we're doing for NBA. But let's hit on this MLB slate tonight. Again, Thursdays are always travel days in baseball, so the slates are always a little bit shorter. We got what, 5-game slate tonight? I haven't even looked at it, so this is going to be interesting. And why don't we just let's do what we always do? Let's go through the base build. And what are we doing for baseball? Do we do a cash settings build, or because we want correlation? Like, we don't want to take correlation all the way down, right?
Yep. Let's do this. Let's do the GPP settings with sim diversity on 1. That's going to make it a little bit easier just to build 500 lineups just to see. But this is going to make Sabersim build lineups. What this is going to basically do, it's going to look very similar to somebody sitting down at any other optimizer, setting a rule saying put a stack in every lineup, and then building the top projected lineups out of the pool here. So we'll give this a minute to run. I think it's a perfect example, right? I always say on the show, the cash build or the base build is a good way to get familiar with the slate. It's exactly what AP and I are doing here right now, right? Taking a look at the slate for the first time, breaking it down here, seeing just what the optimals are going to be. This is what most people are going to get without touching anything else. And it gives you an idea of where we can start to get different, though. Been an interesting season while this is building to start so far. Offense is way up. We've also, we've had some really good hitting weather to start the year here. It seems like we had some good wind. Temperatures are a little higher than normal, but the rules changes too. The pace of play faster, the bigger bases. It just seems like everybody's scoring more. And I actually think I don't even think Vegas has totally adjusted to that. I think Vegas is still under projecting the totals on some of these games a little bit. So it makes for an interesting start to the season. I'm curious, AP, your thoughts on that? Anything you've noticed on your end, or any way that's kind of affected your process?
I love it. I love these new rules. I think, whenever you get, anything faster, it's going to be a little bit better. But I think it puts a lot of pressure on the pitchers. I think when you're, for the hitting, it think about guys going and doing batting practice. Those balls are just coming and you're in a rhythm. You're hitting. That's going to, in my opinion, put a lot more pressure on pitching. And our guys, Draft Cheat, JT Hayes, Steve Boynton have been talking about this. Gary, they've been talking about this with baseball this year and how so what I've been doing is I want to focus on the value of a strike. I think is so much greater. You want guys that are throwing strikes, racking up those points because it creates a nice floor. So Nick Lodolo on this slate is going to be someone that I'm heavily looking at. And then you're looking at weather. You're looking at, I think, the ump factors too come into play. You have some umps that are far better for hitting and some that are far better for pitching. So all of those things, I think, are going to be something that takes on a greater emphasis. The other thing too is just there's a value component just by fading chalk alone. And that's something that even in the toughest of spots, like yesterday, Wrigley, 85 degrees, winds blowing out. And then we also had it was Coors Field. It was hot, winds blowing out, and bad pitchers on the mounds. But still, I don't recall exactly what the stacks were that won yesterday. There was a lot going on, but I know Wrigley, I think, disappointed. And let me pull up yesterday's slate. 7-4 game in Coors Field. I was looking at the two pitchers on the mound. I was thinking we were going to see a 9-6 type game, 9-7, 7-4. I don't know if that's fully shipping tournaments. So what I'm getting at is there's definitely some value to it. If your style is just to be the ultimate contrarian, creating these unique stacks, going all in on 5 threes, 5 2, 5 2 1s, and attacking spots that people are off of. A few examples of those that I always look for. I love the Braves right now. I love when I can get them lower owned. Sometimes we get them lower owned on the road when they're facing a mediocre pitcher. Anytime we do that, I'm always looking at them and I'm bumping them up. Anytime I can get the Braves lower ownership or a good offense that's lower owned, I'm going to have interest, especially this year. So I think my interpretation of these new rules where we've seen some of these wild games, the Royals put up 10 runs the other day. Again, they're going to bust more often than not But if you implement good bankroll management, and if you understand that this is a season-long type of thing, or even take it like month by month, like take every single month that you have, and your goal is, I want 2 big hits this month, 3 big hits, 4 big hits, whatever it is, then you're not as focused on the week by week or day by day results. You're more longer term focused, oriented. So that's how I look at baseball. That's what I love doing with my 20 max strategy. Every day, first thing I do, I go reserve max the $4.20. I dupe those builds. I put them in the 15, and then I run one main single entry lineup, or sometimes 2. Usually I have between, and I'm not the biggest player out there, but by any means at all. But my strategy is more longer term. I have anywhere between $650 to $1,200 in play on a slate, and I just take that day by day. And over time, it's been awesome. I've had a really good start to the year for me, and a lot of it is just taking advantage of these new rules, like embracing some of these lower-owned offenses that are in spots that we normally wouldn't target.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, with NBA, it's such a projection-heavy sport that if you're playing the right way, it's hard to brick slates, especially multi-entering. Like you're going to have lineups perform pretty well. It still takes a lot of work to take something down, but you're not going to have a lot of total lost slates. Baseball is a different story, right? I think you can play perfectly, play a great portfolio of good lineups and have none of them cash at the end of the night. And you have to take that in stride and kind of know, hey, I still, I did the right thing long-term over the course of the month, over the course of the season. This is going to work out for me when I hit it. And that can be tough, but I think that's mainly like a main thing of just setting that up mentally, that you kind of know that that's the case, and you're playing for the long run there and not the short run. But we've got our build pulled up here. I think the main things that I like to look at here is just, what are the top projected owned guys and what guys are showing up in this cash build. Can give you an idea again of just what the field's going to do. It looks like Blue Jay stacks on the hitting side tonight. It looks like Spencer Turnbull on the mound for Detroit. 5-game slate, no team with like a huge total. So field looks like it's gravitating towards the best overall team on the slate here and the best pitching matchup, which makes some sense. Sabersim agrees with the projections here. Just sorting by projected score in this cash build, that's the build that's popping here. Some value hitters on the Reds looks to be kind of the other team that starts popping up here. The discrepancies from what the field is doing here versus what the Sabersim projections like just with the cash stuff seems to really be Aaron Judge, and maybe to a lesser extent, really just Judge, and maybe some of these Cardinals stacks. A couple guys showing up as somewhat chalky here for the Cardinals, not showing up a lot in the Sabersim optimals. So, I think that can potentially be a good fade spot, or maybe a spot where those guys are actually going to come in a little bit lower owned than we're projecting here. But this is kind of, what I'm seeing at first glance here for the slate. It looks like Blue Jays, maybe some Reds thrown in there. And then on the pitcher, you nailed it, right? Nick Lodolo. And then it looks like Chris Bassett here. Another situation on the pitching side where the ownership projections, which are based on industry projections, seem to think that Jordan Montgomery is going to be that second guy. The Sabersim projections think it's Chris Bassett. So I'd probably split the difference between these two guys and think that they probably both come in a little bit closer to maybe 35% rather than 30 and 40. But another spot I think to look into a bit, because those might be a little bit of a split between who gets kind of the SP2 honors in the cash build and the smaller entry builds.
Yeah, so I mean, this is this is going to be kind of an interesting slate because it's not like a massive slate. Lodolo, I like his stuff. I think he's going to be really good. But again, Cincinnati, a tough park to pitch in. It's one we like to target, and the weather looks good, almost 80 degrees. I mean, man, this is going to be where, so when you look at Nick Lodolo, who does he struggle with? Usually against right-handed power bats. But again, it's tough because you got a lefty and Kyle Schwarber there that could take anyone deep. So he's got Turner, Alec Boehm's been okay. The bottom of the lineup, he's going to be fine. Most likely. I'm going off the projected lineup. But again, you could make if you're the ultimate contrarian, you could make a case to stack a couple Phillies guys here. The Twins against Johnny Brito, I think, is somewhat interesting. He's looked really good. He's their young guy, I believe a rookie. He's looked good in his last few starts. kind of looked a little shaky against Baltimore, just not as good as when he faced the Giants. Didn't get as many Ks in that matchup. Maybe the Twins get it going. 87, winds blowing out 10 miles an hour. That could be another spot. Just to get off this Blue Jay, like if the Blue Jays are going to be the chalk team, now I do like the Blue Jays. I'm really trying to make an emphasis of fading or finding ways to just fade some of these chalk hitters. Now you can do that with Blue Jay stacks. Like you could, like one way to get a little bit different. Do the 6, 7, 8, 9 1 stack. Off the projected. That's Brandon Belt, Kirky, Biggio, Kiermaier, who's been pretty good, and then George Springer. I mean, that's a way to get a little bit different because everyone likes to go 1 through 5. Is there any way to create rules to like eliminate like 1 through 5 stacks? Or I mean, is there really a rule to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we can here. Let's do that. So you'd have to do this kind of team by team here. Okay. So let's see. I'd have to think this through a little bit. So if we wanted to take the Blue Jays here and set up a rule, we can take the order here and then group rule, manual, and then it would be conditional here. So I think what we would say is if basically anybody of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was in the lineup, then use exactly 0. Actually, use no more. That's, I think, the way we do it. Use no more than 1 of the same group. I think this would work here. Just thinking through the logic. I think that makes sense. So basically, we're saying, so if one player of what batting 1 through 5 on the Blue Jays is in the lineup, then it can be the only player in that lineup. I think that will work.
Okay,
we can test it here real quick. Let me just give that a shot and see. But I think the logic is right there. So
I guess you could also make a group where you include 1 through 5, and you just say,
what am I doing?
A max of like 3 or something, because that will automatically eliminate the ability to have any 1 through 5.
Yeah, I am way overthinking this. Yes, you are right.
No, I get what you're doing there.
The easiest thing to do here is putting 1 through 5 in here, and then just saying what the maximum amount of these guys you're comfortable with. So if it's max 3 stacking, then use no more than 3. If you don't even want to stack the 1 through 5 of this team at all, you could use no more than 1. That's the simplest way to do it. Yes, that makes more sense. That should work there.
Good question by my guy Jordan here. Do you guys X out any teams, or do you just lower the team totals? I usually lower the team totals instead of completely Xing them out in case I miss something. Yeah, Jordan, I'm kind of in line with you there. Doing 20 max, I do want to – actually, I'll show you what I do once we get to the step 3. I'll show you exactly what I do. But I'm not Xing teams out, but I kind of am in a way. I just do it in the team stacks area in step 3.
Yeah, so I ran a build here. So this is kind of the GPP build. This is using the simulations. This is taking into account ownership, and it's going to find us some fades here. So let's talk about this here a little bit. I mean, first glance, right? So now we're not sorting by projected score. What I'm building here for is like a 5,000 person 20 max or something like that. It's going to change quite a bit what we're getting here. And we can take a quick look. First of all, very interested now in Bassett under the field on Lodolo here. Joe Ryan popping up a little bit on the pitchers. We look over at those stacks. Big change. Full fade in the first 20 out of 1,500 of Toronto. Pretty heavy on the Brewers here. Looks like a pretty low-owned team there. Some direct leverage against Lodolo with the Philly stacks here. So this is now kind of our default tournament build using simulations and taking into account ownership here. So I've got a couple things that I like to talk about here that I go into as well. But AP, what were you going to say here with what you're looking at on the team stack section?
Yeah, actually, I must have missed what settings you use for that. How did we get the full? Okay.
Yep. So
was there anything else that we put in there to get the Toronto fade?
No. So all this is doing, it's using the high sim diversity, still the high correlation to make sure we're getting those stacks. What is really doing this here is the Saber scores. So it is the small slate. It's a 5-game slate. relatively small contest as well here. And what this is doing is it's looking at the projection of the lineup. It's looking at the upside of the lineup. How high can it score when it hits its 99th? And then it is punishing pretty heavily for the adjusted ownership of the lineup. And we've talked about the adjusted ownership the last couple shows we've done. Really cool feature. What it's doing is it's looking at the ownership projection, but also the variance of the player to adjust the ownership. So you can see for pitchers, safer than hitters, right? The adjusted ownership is pretty close to the Sabersim ownership. We go over to the hitters here. Adjusted ownership is going to be a lot higher than the regular ownership, which Sabersim is saying, hey, the hitting chalk is worse than the pitching chalk, which is it's generally true in baseball. So more aggressive fades on the chalky hitters than the chalky pitchers. But yeah, the stacks here is really coming from the Saber score sorting. You see, we actually just have 30% Toronto stacks in our pool. We just don't have any in our top 20 here.
That very much aligns with kind of what I was saying, just looking at ways to, like the Brewers were, against Nick Martinez, who, like, I'm not afraid of Nick Martinez. And the Brewers have a ton of lefties that they're going to roll out. I believe Nick Martinez definitely struggles against the left-handed hitters. So that right there is really interesting to see them at the top spot. This is the part that I'm talking about, how I manage everything on the back end. So I'm running 750, 1,000 builds, 1,500, depending on what I'm doing. And this is where I manage it. And if there's a team I just don't like, let's just say I want to fade the Cardinals, I just put max exposure to 0. So to answer Jordan's question, I'm not Xing a team out, but I am in a way by controlling it on the back end. So because I can always put that back at it, I could go, maybe I change my mind. I could, just like that. And I could take a look at those builds. But if I don't like those builds and I want something else, you can easily manage it in this team stack sections. And the other thing I like to do too is in 20 max, I like to have like 3-4 spots that I'm kind of focused on. My style's to have a little bit more concentrated exposure. And so I will set a cap like on Milwaukee. What I might do is put that at 35 max exposure. And now what's going to happen is now other teams are going to pop up. Okay, Philly, I'm going to look at that. I'm going to sift through some of those builds. I'm going to look to see if there's how many are 5-man stacks, how many are 3-man stacks. Are there any 2-mans in there? And if I want to dial that back a little bit, I might say, okay, and go back to the all and be like, all right, I like Philly, but I don't want to be crazy over on them. Let's bring them down to 35 or 30, and now, another team's going to pop up. I'll review those. I like to do this until I get overweight relative to the field on individual stacks per team, and where I only have 3 to 4, sometimes five teams showing up in that spot. So my style a little bit more concentrated, but that's 20 builds. I do the same thing with pitchers too. I like to have a pitching pool of 3 to 5, and I'll do, unless there's an absolute lock, like unless it's Garrett Cole, who's just been mowing, and I won't do that for him. But if it's a slate like this one where we could see a lot of variance at the pitching position, I might set my top end exposure to like 50%, 45, 50%. And now what I'm doing is mixing and matching my pitching pool with my concentrated stacks pool on the other side. And I do all of this in the step 3, and I love it. And I've had a lot of success with doing that so far in this way.
And I'm so happy to hear that. I really want to stress that point. Like this is the right way to use the tool here, is to run the build, right? Get the lineups that the Sims like. You have so many different combinations of 20 lineups that you can pick out of a pool of 1,500 simulation-based lineups. So starting here in this build here, making your adjustments. I mean, you just saw it here as I was doing this, as AP was talking, right? We're bumping down some of the stacks. We can even do a hard cap of 35% to any one stack. We can do a hard cap of 50% to any one pitcher. We can go into our stack types, make sure our stacks look good. They look great to me right now, but maybe you wanted to clean up a little bit here and still have so many different combinations of what you can get. So really, I see some other questions as well here. Should I X my pitchers out before the build? You can and you should if you can't get what you're looking for in the first build you run, right? If you're, if you want to get all in on, a pitcher here that you're not getting, maybe you really want to double fade the Blue Jays and play some Spencer Turnbull. Not a lot of that guy in our pool here, just 53 lineups. So in that case, sure, go back to the home screen, set him in exposure, bump up his projection. But I think especially, people using Sabersim for the first time, try it in a build. I think people are always surprised at how flexible and how diverse the pool of lineups you're going to get in your build is to get what you're looking for. So I did want to also one other thing. So McKeel had a question earlier saying often getting 80 to 100% exposure to players. What's a good max exposure? I think what AP just walked through here makes a ton of sense. I think you can kind of use the pool exposure sometimes as like a good baseline for how high you want to be exposed. So, 48.5% to Chris Bassett in the entire pool. Maybe you do a hard cap of your pitchers at 50% for your pool. You can do the team stacks as well, right? Maybe, the team that's showing up the most in the pool is Toronto at 30%. Maybe you say, I'm not going to use any stack more than 30% to spread out that way. Another thing I love to use, and I just want to mention it here, I'm going to actually just reset those adjustments because I want to show what this impact has here, is the min uniques. So if you're not really sure, if you don't want to like fade or take a stand on a particular team or anything like that, you just want to get your lineup pool a little bit more diverse, you can start increasing this min uniques here, and it'll do that. Basically, you're telling Sabersim, hey, you handle my diversity, right? You figure out exactly where I should trim things out. So if we bump this up to even like 4 here, see what the impact of that is. It's going to start smoothing. It didn't even have a big impact on the pitchers here, but it's going to start smoothing out your hitting exposures here. And as you increase this further, smooth out some of these other exposures.
If you use that min uniques, you should probably be a little bit cautious. Well, tell me if I'm right or wrong in this, but like with how much I'm managing and adjusting in the team stacks area, and then even in my pitching pool, limiting to like 45%, high end on certain pitchers, you should be a little bit cautious, use the min uniques, right? Or can you still use that?
You can definitely still use it. If you start using a really high min unique number and you're really restrictive with your exposures, eventually you are going to run out of lineups because you're telling Sabersim, hey, meet all of these exposures I want and make sure every lineup in my 20 is 5 players different. Eventually you're going to run out. So what I would do probably is adjust everything you want in your exposures. So get that set first. And then what I like to do is figure out, so let's actually go back to 1 here and let's put in some of these things again here. So let's do 30 max per stack. So this is basically us kind of getting where we want things as a baseline. And then let's do 50% max per pitcher to get this back here. What I like to do is kind of figure out where's the limit of min uniques where I start getting the message from Sabersim. So maybe it's at, let's just be really aggressive here and try like 6. And okay, I mean, even 6 is still doable with all the exposure requests we already put in. But I like to figure out where that top end limit is. Yeah, I mean, baseball, it's a high variance sport, right? That's the show.
Yeah, go to the bottom build because then you can show people the rank of, because it's probably pulling in build number 648.
Yeah,
or
this
whatever.
is
I kind of like that too. And you can go review and look at the builds, and you're like, oh man, this ranks 648, like way down based off of like the initial score or whatever. But when you look at the build, you're like, oh yeah, that build can make some sense. It might be out there, just like that one is a little bit out there, stacking up the Tigers and Padres, but still, it's correlated nicely. The stacks make sense, and it's baseball. Anything can happen. It's a leverage. Like I love anytime you can gain some leverage. You got to make smart plays, and that's why I like real simple. Like I know Draft Cheat has pitching dialed in these guys. I'll pull up his pool, and a lot of what I do is I'll X out all the pitchers, and then I look at his pool and I bring back the pitchers in his pool. And I don't even mess around with the projections too much. I just like setting top end caps on each guy. Now this is non-ace slates. When we get those slates where it's like loaded pitching, I'm different. I just lock those guys in, like Garrett Cole, just as he keeps mowing. I'm fine getting overweight and then getting different in hitting. But on slates like this one tonight, where there's an ace, and I think Lodolo is going to kind of solidify himself as a stud, but he's still young. He's still in a hitter-friendly park in Cincinnati. It's 80 degrees. It's a tough spot. So I don't mind being a little bit different. Like Joe Ryan against the Yankees. Joe Ryan's looked really good. The Hound, Chris Bassett, like you talked about, against the Tigers, a great spot. But again, these guys aren't locks. There's risk to each one of these. And that's why I don't mind having that pool and mixing and matching and trying to get that right combination with stacks that I have really defined as well.
Yeah.
Trying to see. It looks like we don't have any other questions. We do got to get out of here shortly. Jordan, is there anything else that you want to hit on baseball related or anything coming up that the people should be aware of?
Yeah, I will. One other thing that I do like to look at here is this stack pool exposure here, especially like when looking at my initial stacks. Sometimes I'll just go and see, is a team that is facing a popular pitcher here showing up with a lot of pool exposure that I'm not getting any exposure to right off the bat. So, I mean, I'd have to look. I guess Detroit actually is kind of one that jumps out. We did get a little exposure to Detroit as we started changing these max exposures. But if we kind of reset this here real quick, in baseball, get it. It's like anything can happen. These teams are going to get so low owned. If 16% of our lineups are showing up with this stack that I think no one is going to play, sometimes I'll just go and just right away be like, I'm getting there. Because Sabersim's saying they're optimal here enough for me to be comfortable with. And no one's playing Tigers on this slate. So it's another thing that I just will – sometimes I'll just go find either a bad, unpopular team or a team playing against a chalky, especially like a value SP2 kind of pitcher, and I'll just go get some exposure there. So one other thing that I kind of like to look at here. But on the Sabersim side, I mean, team's still hard at work. I've been mentioning it here for weeks on just some bigger updates to the app to just make things a little bit easier to use, make things a little more updated. We've added a ton of features to the app over the last year here, and now we need to do a little bit of work on our end to make the infrastructure support it all a little bit better. So that's kind of what's going on behind the scenes on our end. Getting closer on that. I don't have an ETA or anything on that project right now, but that's the big project for us.
Gotcha. Last question here from Mikhail. Can you trust the 4,867th ranked lineup? I think that's what he's talking about there.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, you're not going to go that deep, but I get what he's asking. I get what he's saying. It comes down to a couple things. If you're playing cash, if you're playing 3 max, single entry, if you're playing in a contest with not that many people in it, then no, you don't need to do that. If you're playing a contest, a large field, multi-entry tournament, and let's just say it's 150 max, but you're not running 150 lineups. Let's just say you're running 20. I do that all the time. I think it's fine. I still like to take more risks. It all comes down to what your risk tolerance is. I view if you're doing that 20 max strategy that I talked about at the start of the show, you got to have a longer term mind frame, a longer term, mindset with all of this. I know on a day-to-day basis, I'm not going to ship, but on a month-to-month basis, I should have 4 to 5 days where I'm sweating that top spot or I'm hitting pretty big. That's my strategy. So it really just comes down to your bankroll management, your overall risk tolerance, and what your strategy is. If it's a shorter term cash game type strategy, yeah, you're going to want those higher projected lineups. You're going to want the more of those optimal type builds. If it's not, then it's more kind of what I'm doing. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, and I think you can trust the last lineups in your pool in baseball a lot more than you can in a sport like NBA. There's a lot more viability. Projection is going to correlate a lot less to the actual expected value of the lineups. In NBA, I think you're going to have a harder sell on saying that, the first 100 lineups in your pool are just as good as the last 100 lineups in your pool. For baseball, that might actually very well be the case. So very sport dependent there as well in terms of what lineups make sense.
Nice, good stuff. Sorry, that's something funny going on here. Good stuff here, Jordan. I think we can call it a day. Again, if you ever have any questions on the Run Pure side, hit us up in Discord and everything. And the one thing I will say on our end, we've been dealing with some technical stuff with the websites. We got, attacks coming in on the Run Pure site. Security measures are starting to work, so it feels good. I know there's been some short-term headaches, but I feel like we're coming over that hurdle right then and there. Again, we set up a support channel. So if you remember, we set up a support channel. We're going to have a facts section on the website that you can also go to as well. To report any issues that you're personally having. So we're making these adjustments, and yeah, things are starting to come around. But any final things, Jordan, or are you good?
I'm good, man. I'm looking forward to this slate now. Very excited for playoff basketball as well. No, nothing else for me in the meantime.
All right, we'll be back next week. If you got questions, hit me up. If you have any ideas, hit me up as well. That's Jordan. I'm AP. Let's run here.